Hey, what's going on everybody? It's Mr. Buddy here, and today I'm going to be continuing my series where I share my ideas for what I think the canon Pokemon teams for Pokemon main characters could be. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, I'd recommend checking out my first video in this series, because in it, I give a very thorough explanation of what I'll be doing throughout these videos. If you don't feel like watching it, however, I'll still sum up the general idea pretty quickly. Basically, none of Pokemon's player characters, aside from Red, have been given canon Pokemon teams they use within the Pokemon games universe. And in this series, I'll be theorizing and speculating on what Pokemon said characters could use on their teams. This is in no way official, and I'm not saying the teams I've made are what these characters would truly use, but this is just a fun series where I share my ideas on what Pokemon I think the main characters could have on their canon teams. Alright, let's get into the actual topic now, and the focus of today's video is going to be about Dawn and Lucas, the protagonists of the Generation 4 games, and what Pokemon they could use on their canon team. Now, before I actually dive into what said team could be, I wanted to quickly go over the method I used to determine what a character's quote-unquote canon Pokemon team could be. There's two main aspects I look at. What Pokemon are given to them throughout the main story of whatever game they're present in, which in the case of Dawn and Lucas, I'll be looking at Pokemon Platinum, and I also look at what Pokemon they're forced to encounter on their journey through the region. The reason I have these criteria when making Pokemon teams for the player characters is because Red, who is the only playable character so far to be turned into an NPC and given an official team, has a Pokemon team that fits into these parameters. If we look at Pokemon Yellow as a basis, we can see that all of Red's Pokemon were either given to him by various people, or he was forced to encounter them on his journey. And that's how I came up with the criteria for what other playable characters' Pokemon teams could be. Not the most definitive method by any means, but it's as close to the game's canon as I think we can get. One last thing I want to quickly address before we get into everything is that Generation 4 continued the idea introduced in Generation 3, where the opposite player character you don't choose to play as has a role in the story. For example, if you choose to play as Dawn, then Lucas would be Professor Rowan's aide and be a helpful ally in the region, and if you choose to play as Lucas, then Dawn would have that same role. The reason I bring this up is because as the Professor's aide of Generation 4, both Dawn and Lucas have a team already made. But for this video, I'm going to be looking at them when they're the protagonist of Generation 4 instead of a side character. I know this gets a little bit confusing, but the team I'm making for them is what they would theoretically use to become Sinnoh's champion and take on Cyrus and the Distortion World. Alright, let's jump into this fully now and take a look at what Dawn and Lucas's possible canon team could be. So going by the criteria I laid out, their first Pokemon would be the final form of one of the Generation 4 starters, being Infernape, Empoleon, and Torterra, given to them by Professor Rowan at the start of the game. Their next Pokemon would be a Togekiss, which was given to them as a Togepi egg by Cynthia in Eterna City. After this, they would have a Glaceon/Leafeon, which they receive as an Eevee from BB in Hearthome City. Pokemon number 4 would be a Porygon Z, which they get as a Porygon in Veilstone City. Their next Pokemon would be a Lucario, which is given to them as a Riolu egg from Riley on Iron Island, and their final Pokemon would be a Rotom, more specifically the Rotom inhabiting the Old Chateau. Now, give or take, this is what I think Dawn and Lucas, as the hero of Generation 4, would canonically use. There's a few quirks to this team, so let me briefly go through and talk about some aspects about it. First up, I think Dawn and Lucas would definitely have one of the new Generation 4 evolutions to represent the Sinnoh region, but I wasn't quite sure which one they would have. I feel like there's arguments to be made for both of them, with Leafeon potentially being available earlier, but Glaceon fitting into their team a little bit better in terms of typing, so I decided to keep it pretty open-ended and say that they would theoretically have one of these two Sinnoh evolutions. The other thing I wanted to mention about this team is the Rotom I put on it. Interestingly enough, the Generation 4 protagonists are one of the few groups of main characters who are not given or forced to encounter enough Pokemon to make up an entire team. And because of that, I had to go a little bit outside of my regular criteria when thinking of their team. What I decided to do was look at a few of the special encounter Pokemon that are present in Sinnoh. These are Pokemon like Spiritomb, Drifloon, and Rotom that aren't legendaries but are still treated as somewhat rare Pokemon and have some kind of special event surrounding them. I ended up going with Rotom because I felt like its typing would work well with the rest of Dawn and Lucas's team, and I also think that Dawn and Lucas would wind up going through the Old Chateau at some point on their journey. Alright, so that's what I think the canon team for Don and Lucas as the protagonists of Generation 4 would be. But, as I always do, I wanted to take a look at an alternate team for them where they would have all 3 starters from their region. So for Don and Lucas's B team, they would have the final forms of the 3 Sinnoh starters, a Togekiss given to them as a Togepi egg by Cynthia, a Glaceon/Leafeon given to them as an Eevee from BB, and a Lucario given to them as a Riolu egg from Riley. Anyways, what do you guys think? Given the criteria I laid down, do you think these teams are close to what the Generation 4 protagonists would canonically have? Maybe you think they'd have a Giratina on their canon team because they are technically forced to encounter one in the Distortion world. Let me know what you guys think of these canon team ideas, and feel free to share your own thoughts and possible teams below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.